The storm erupted with a violence that made my instruments scream warnings 3 minutes too late. I'd been tracking the atmospheric instability for hours, confident my predictive models would give adequate warning before anything dangerous developed. Apparently, Keth 7, weather patterns had opinions about Vedrani meteorological confidence. Lightning split the sky in jagged patterns that defied normal electrical behavior, striking the same rocky outcroppings repeatedly as if the planet had personal grievances. Wind speeds exceeded my portable habitat's rated tolerances, and when a ground surge fried my generator, I had approximately 4 minutes before exposure to this environment became a serious medical problem. The structure appeared through the driving rain like a hallucination, solid walls, intact roof, definitely artificial. My survey data said this planet was uninhabited, had been for millennia. This building shouldn't exist, but my rapidly failing shelter situation suggested questioning. Its provenance was less important than reaching it before lightning decided I looked like an interesting target. I ran. Not the dignified pace appropriate for a Vedrani geological surveyor, but the desperate sprint of someone whose survival equipment just became expensive debris. The door resisted, then gave way under my shoulder. I tumbled inside and slammed it shut as thunder shook the walls hard enough to rattle my bones. Darkness, complete and disorienting. I activated my low-light vision, and the interior resolved into unfamiliar shapes. Furniture, primitive but functional. Tools whose purposes I couldn't immediately identify. Supplies stacked with organizational logic I didn't recognize. The aesthetic was wrong for Vedrani construction. Wrong for any species I'd studied. My scientific training cataloged details automatically. Dwellings showed recent occupation. Construction methods suggested limited technological sophistication but solid practical engineering. Scents in the air indicated organic food preparation and movement. I froze, every predator awareness instinct my species evolved on our harsh homeworld suddenly screaming alerts. Something else was in here, something large enough to be a threat. Light exploded across my vision, blinding my adapted sight. I raised my hands defensively, blinking away afterimages, and when my vision cleared, I found myself staring at something that absolutely should not exist on this uninhabited frontier world. A human. Male based on the physical indicators I'd memorized from intelligence briefings. Taller than average for his species, broader through the shoulders, with those distinctive small ears and forward-facing eyes that gave humans their unsettling direct stare. He was holding something, a tool, possibly a weapon, though he kept it pointed away from me. We stared at each other in mutual shock. My training materials on human contact flashed through my mind. Unpredictable species, rapid technological advancement, expansion into frontier space causing tension with elder civilizations. Approach with extreme caution, avoid solo encounters, report immediately to. I'd just broken into a human's home. Alone, during a storm, without backup or proper protocols. This was either going to be a very short night or a very complicated one. The human spoke, a string of sounds in that flat, oddly rhythmic language they used. I caught none of it. He paused, then tried again in what sounded like standard galactic, but so heavily accented I barely recognized it as language. You, why, here? I raised my hands higher, making sure he could see I held nothing threatening. Storm, I said carefully in standard, pointing toward the window where lightning still painted the sky white. Shelter, emergency. His grip on the tool, I could see now it was some kind of repair implement, not a weapon, relaxed slightly. He gestured toward the door, clearly asking for confirmation, and I nodded. Understanding flickered across his face. He indicated I should stay in the area near the door while he remained near the room's other side, establishing boundaries. Reasonable, given the circumstances. The storm intensified, wind howling around the structure's edges. Something in the ceiling cracked with a sound that made my geological training kick in automatically. That was load-bearing material failing. The human, he tapped his chest and said something that sounded like Daniel. Moved immediately, securing support beams with the kind of practiced efficiency that comes from weathering storms here before. I watched him work for 30 seconds before I noticed the real problem. A junction in the corner where 3 beams met, stress fractures visible even from across the room. If that failed, the whole section would collapse. Professional instinct overrode caution. I moved toward it, pointing. There, structural failure imminent. Daniel followed my gesture, eyes widening as he recognized the danger. He looked at me at the junction, back at me. Decision made, he nodded and indicated I should help. We worked in tense silence, communicating through gestures and necessity. I braced the failing junction with my Vadrani strength, greater than human baseline, though I kept it controlled to avoid seeming threatening. Daniel secured it with materials I wouldn't have thought to use, his adaptability compensating for what his species lacked in raw power. A window exploded inward. I saw the debris coming but couldn't move fast enough while holding the beam. Daniel reacted with reflexive speed, putting himself between me and the flying glass. Shards cut his arm, shallow but bleeding. He backed away immediately after, like the protective instinct embarrassed him. "You're injured," I said, though he probably couldn't understand the words. I gestured to his arm to supplies I could see on a shelf. He shook his head, securing the last brace. "Later, first." He mimed the ceiling, the supports, priorities. I could respect that. We finished reinforcing the structure, then stood on opposite sides of the room again, breathing hard. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline, my body processing how close that failure had been. Daniel's arm still bled, but he seemed more concerned with watching me, trying to determine if I was a threat. The irony wasn't lost on me. Both of us afraid of the other. Both of us safer working together than apart. Both of us trapped by circumstances neither had chosen. Thunder rattled the walls. It was going to be a very long night. Hours passed with excruciating slowness. The storm showed no signs of relenting, and I was acutely aware that Daniel and I were stuck together until it did. He moved around the space with careful deliberation, always maintaining distance, always keeping me in his peripheral vision. I did the same, each of us circling like wary animals. Then Daniel did something unexpected. He prepared food, simple process, heating something that smelled organic and vaguely appealing. He portioned it into 2 containers and placed one on the table between us, then pointed to me, to the food, to himself. Universal gesture. "Would you like to share a meal?" It was a peace offering. I recognized it as such across the barriers of species and language. Accepting felt like crossing a threshold from which there was no retreat. Refusing felt like choosing continued hostility over potential understanding. I took the container. "Thank you." The words came out in standard, and from his expression he understood the intent if not the specific language. The food was compatible with Vadrani biology. I'd studied human nutritional requirements enough to know our digestive systems could process similar organic compounds. Bland by my standards, but edible. I mimicked his eating method, and something in his posture relaxed when I didn't reject the offering. He retrieved a device. A translator, I realized, though an older model with limited vocabulary databases. He spoke into it and it produced halting standard. "I am Daniel Chen, research, Earth memory." Earth memory, I parsed that for several seconds before understanding clicked. Geological research, planetary formation and sediment analysis. "Lyxara," I responded, tapping my chest. "Study mineral, stone." The translator struggled with Vadrani technical terminology, planet composition. Understanding dawned in his expression. He stood, moved to a work area, and returned with samples, core drillings, sediment layers, analysis data. He was doing geological research. Independent study from the look of it, just like me. The realization shifted something fundamental. We weren't government representatives or military scouts. We were both solo researchers pursuing knowledge in isolation. The common ground was unexpected and disarming. I showed him my own data, and his eyes widened as he recognized the complementary nature of our work. His focus on planetary formation processes, mine on crystalline mineral structures. Separate methodologies approaching the same fundamental questions from different angles. He sketched something in a physical notebook, a diagram of tectonic theory. I recognized the concept, but noticed an error in his crystalline formation assumptions. I added to his sketch, correcting it. Daniel stared at my addition for a long moment, then laughed. The sound startled me, warm, genuine, transforming his entire face from wary stranger to engaged colleague. He made more notes, incorporated my correction, showed me how it changed his broader model. We spent the next hour in halting scientific exchange, using his sketches, my data, and the translator's fragmentary assistance, discussing geological processes that had occurred millions of years before either of our species existed, finding excitement in shared discovery that transcended the barriers between us. I caught myself relaxing around him. Noticed he'd stopped maintaining careful distance. We were functioning like research partners, the kind of collaboration I'd read about but never expected to experience with a human. But underneath the growing rapport, reality lingered. Our species had tensions, disputes over frontier territories, mutual suspicions. If the wrong people learned about this encounter, a Vedrani alone with a human in an isolated location, neither of us would be judged kindly. The thought sobered me. Daniel seemed to sense the shift in my mood, his expression becoming more guarded again. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, we'd built something fragile and unexpected. I didn't know if it would survive contact with the world beyond these walls. Dawn arrived with reluctant light filtering through the storm-damaged window. Daniel checked his instruments, primitive by Vedrani standards, but clearly functional. He showed me the readings, and even with limited shared vocabulary, the meaning was clear, safe to leave. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt reluctant. This strange, tense night had produced something valuable I couldn't quite name. Daniel moved to his research station and did something that stunned me. He copied months of data onto a portable drive and held it out. The gesture was unmistakable. He was giving me his research, trusting me with work that represented significant time and effort. Why? The translator butchered my question, but he seemed to understand. He pointed to my data, to his, then gestured between us. Together, the combined research was more valuable than either alone. He was choosing scientific collaboration over species paranoia. I transferred my mineral analysis data onto a format his systems could read and offered it in exchange. His smile suggested I'd made the right choice. Then came the complicated part. I attempted to explain through the struggling translator that this encounter should remain private. My leadership viewed humans with suspicion. Some considered them dangerous expansionists, others potential allies being unfairly characterized. A Vedrani alone with a human, even accidentally, would trigger inquiries I didn't want to face. Daniel nodded understanding. He gestured to himself, to the isolated building, and I realized he faced similar complications. Humans operating independently in frontier space were often labeled rogues by their own authorities. We were both outsiders in our own ways, which perhaps explained why we could connect when our species' representatives couldn't. I gathered my damaged equipment, preparing to leave. Daniel approached, then stopped, seemed to reconsider something. Then he extended his hand in that human gesture I'd studied, the handshake meant to convey trust and goodwill. I accepted, feeling the warmth and callous strength in his grip. Our eyes met, and without words, we acknowledged what had happened. Fear transformed into cooperation, prejudice challenged by direct experience, proof that connection was possible when institutions claimed it wasn't. "Thank you," I said, knowing he wouldn't fully understand the standard words, but hoping the intent translated. "For shelter, for trust. Safe travel," he responded through the translator, the device rendering his wishes in choppy but genuine concern. I left as the sun finally broke through dissipating storm clouds. Walking back toward my damaged survey equipment under clearing skies, I carried more than data. I'd experienced something my species' leadership claimed was dangerous, genuine interaction with a human, and found it valuable rather than threatening.